Thank you, Lee, for those kind words of introduction. I must tell each and every one of you that I'm delighted and very pleased to be here. This is my very first Comic Con. I thought about wearing a backpack and a trench coat because on March 7, 1965, when I was 25 years old, had all my hair a few pounds lighter, I was wearing a backpack and a trench coat. But to be here with these two young men, the three of us come from the South, we're Southerners. To be here with Andrew and Nate, and to be part of this effort to tell the story of a struggle for justice, a struggle to create the beloved community, but to create a society where we can lay down the burden of race and move on. Ali told you so many words that in this book, March, we tell the story of my growing up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. It is true that my father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, my father had said, how many of you remember when you was 4? Now, what happened to the rest of us? Well, in 1944, when I was only 4 years old, my father had saved $300. And with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still owns this land today. Corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chickens. It was my responsibility to care for the chicken. And I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else ever raised chickens. I became very good at it. Do any of you know anything about raising chicken? Don't try to fool me now. If some of you know something about Kentucky Fried, another one, Churches, another one? Popeye. Chick-fil-A.
El Pollo Loco.
I didn't know the name of chicken. But as a little boy, I became very good at it. You have to take the fresh eggs and mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. And some of you may be saying, now John Lewis, how do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest, and there would be some more eggs. And you had to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. Do you follow me? You don't follow me. Sometimes I would take these little chicks and give them to another hen. I'll put them in a box with a lantern. Get some more fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under this setting hen, encourage the setting hen to stay in the nest for another 2 weeks. I was never quite able to save $18.90 to order the most inexpensive hatcher incubator from the Sister Roebuck store. Most of you in here are so young. You don't know anything about the Sister Roebuck Kellogg, right? It's a big book, thick book, heavy book, use it for many different things, functions. Some people call it the wish book. I wish I had this, I wish I had that. I just get my wishing. But as a little boy, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and my cousins, we would get all of our chickens together in a chicken yard, like together here in this room. And my brothers and sisters and cousins were on the outside of the chicken yard, but they would have make up the audience, the congregation. And I would start speaking or preaching, and when I look back on some of these chickens with their heads, some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I preached to or talked to in the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues who listen to me today in the Congress. You know what this Congress is all about. But Andrew tells this story in his ability to write and put words together. And Nate, with his unbelievable capacity to draw and to illustrate. And the chicken have named Little Pullet. Little Pullet was like a little yellow chicken that I got to know. And Big Bear. There's some other name. But these chickens taught me something. They taught me patience. They taught me not to give up, not to give in, not to become bitter, or not to become hostile, but to keep the faith. And after those eggs were there for a number of days, for 3 weeks, they were hatched, and there would be some little chicks. When I was growing up, I saw those signs that said white men, white women, colored women. I didn't like those signs. I didn't like the system of segregation and racial discrimination. In 1955, at the age of 15, I heard of Rosa Parks. I heard of Martin Luther King Jr. I met Rosa Parks when I was 17. The next year, at the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr. And I got involved in the civil rights movement. I remember in 1956, so inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library in a little town of Troy, Alabama, trying to check out some books, trying to get library cards. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for colors. I never went back to the library until July 5th, 1998. They gave me a library card. It says something about the distance we've come and the progress was made in America. But in 1957, when I finished high school, I wrote a letter to Martin Luther King Jr. and told him I wanted to attend a little school 10 miles from my home, Troy State College. It is now known as Troy University. Submitted an application, a high school transcript, never heard a word from the college. So Dr. King responded to my letter and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. But in the meantime, I'd been accepted to a little college in Nashville, Tennessee. So on September 7th, an uncle of mine gave me a Foot Locker, one of these huge trunks. I put everything that I own in that Foot Locker, except no chicken. He also gave me a $100 bill, money that I ever had, and I took a bus to Nashville, Tennessee. But it was during that time that we started studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. And many of us grew to accept nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. I got involved in something called a sit-in. We had test sit-ins in the fall of 1959. Then started sitting down on a regular basis in the spring of 1960. We studied the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. And we were sitting at a lunch counter. Take these tables here, be a lunch counter. Black and white students sitting there waiting to be served, and someone would come up and spit on us, or put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs. Pour hot water, hot coffee, hot chocolate on us, if we would look straight ahead. Because we really believe that through the power of love, peace, and nonviolence, we could transform the city of Nashville and transform America and create a beloved community. And so in March, book 1, it is that story of a young child growing up, very poor, but who was inspired by the teaching of Gandhi, the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr., the action of Rosa Parks, and others. By sitting down, we were standing up for the very best in American tradition. During that period, I got arrested 40 times. beaten, left bloody during the Freedom Ride, during the march from Selma to Montgomery. Didn't become bitter or hostile. Kept the faith and kept my eyes on the prize. So 50 years ago, I stood up with Martin Luther King Jr. and several others to be one of the speakers at the March on Washington. And out of the 10 people that spoke 50 years ago, I spoke number 6, Dr. King spoke number 10, I'm the only one still around. So, Nate and Andrew, I want to thank you. Thank you two young men for having the courage to believe that we could do this and do it together. I think this is our first appearance together since the book came out, right? And we're coming distance. We still have a distance to go. We have miles to travel. It's our hope that young people and people not so young will be inspired by March and have the courage, the raw courage, to get in the way, to get in trouble, good trouble, and to make some noise. So thank you very much.